Hi there, and welcome to In Our Eyes, a video series on race featuring a community of allies and accomplices. My name is Mimi Gonzalez.
And I'm John Jaramillo. And what this series is about, what had triggered this series was specifically the death of George Floyd. Obviously, we've had these cases in our country for centuries, decades now, with the proliferation of social media and cell phone cameras. But there was something kind of gratuitous about this particular case that kind of just, after I had seen that news, Mimi had posted an article on LinkedIn about what this means to her, um, and how we should move forward and what it means to look for allies, to be an ally. And there was just something about the case at hand with George Floyd and just finding Mimi's article on LinkedIn. So I shared it, provided some comments, and then kind of like after a day or two, I kind of went back to her and I messaged her and said, okay, what are we going to do? So luckily she was game for starting a series like this where we could interview people and have these conversations that are difficult, because I think from my point of view, I think the wrong conversation has been taking place, that keeps everybody separate. Um, and there's just a lot of honesty that needs to take place. So I reached out to her and she was game for it. And Mimi, I want to thank you for doing that, for being game for this and jumping right in. I mean, and you can speak to your experience, what you might have thought when, again, it's not that George's life mattered more than anybody before his, but there was just something about that particular case that kind of, you could see it all over the world. We were just talking about that protest in various countries, war-torn countries like Syria, they're painting murals, I can't breathe. So what is it about this moment that has kind of stood out for you that kind of drove us to do this?
Yeah, I think you touched upon it earlier, just the fact that it was caught on camera, I mean, this stuff has been happening for years, as you mentioned, and I think just the way this happened, and you hear the bystanders like yelling at the cops like, he can't breathe, like, get off of him and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like this specific instance, I think a lot of people are envisioning like, oh my gosh, what if that was my father, or what if that was my uncle, or what if that was my friend? And so I'm sure I'm not the only one in this who, I'm the type of person where if something is going on in the media, I need to write about it. I need to express how I feel. And I didn't know. And I'm so grateful that after writing this article, that now we have this awesome thing together. And I can't wait to hear the voices and experiences of others. But I was so emotional for several days. I couldn't focus at work. I was really sad, because I've seen my dad be racially profiled before, and he is a Black man, and it's just like, wow, that could easily be my dad one day. And it's just this eerie feeling that brought me to the point where, okay, well, clearly this keeps happening, so we need to do something different. And if we want different, we need to move different. So that's why I kind of put that call to action for allies, because clearly I feel like people of color can't do this on their own. We need white allies. We even need allies in the Latinx community, in the Asian community, so on and so forth. We really just need to, we can't just say united we stand, divided we fall. What does that mean? Like, we need to come together, and what does
Yeah,
coming together mean? And so I think with that is really putting it out there, like, hey, are you my ally? Do you know what responsibility comes with being an ally? That doesn't just mean you're learning about what's going on, or it means that you are taking this struggle as your own, and
yeah,
you're willing to take on this fight with me and with our Black brothers and sisters and everything that's going on, because we can't have this happen anymore. Like, this is just has got to end. It has to
yeah,
end. And I think that this panel series and video series that we're doing is a way to give people the opportunity to express how they feel, right? We're creating a safe space for us to talk about these very uncomfortable things, right? But one thing I need to say here is this is not the time to be comfortable. So if
no,
this is what it's going to take for us to get out of our comfort zone and talk about these difficult things, so be it. We need to it's like a domino effect. If we create this space, maybe this will help someone facilitate a really uncomfortable conversation with
exactly,
their friends or family.
exactly.
So yeah.
I'm hoping we get that ripple effect out of this.
Yeah.
Like I said before, these things happen and happen and happen. So you'll watch TV and you'll see interviews between different communities bringing things to the table. You'll see a lot of emotion, which is obviously right because it's just so it's heinous what's been going on for centuries, and now we see it even up close and personal. You know, it's brought to our TVs, to our cell phones. We're always on our cell phones. But with this one, it was for me specifically, especially gratuitous. And again, it's not that his life mattered more or less than anybody else's, but it was just a matter, I've told you before, it was just a matter of putting myself in the position of that cop. It's a traffic stop. There's a few other cops around. Whatever scuffle led to where he is now, there's a black man in my restraint, whether it's a chokehold, whether it's a knee to the back of the neck. And everybody's telling you to get away from him. He can't breathe. You know people are filming this. I mean, you should know people are filming this. And it's not to say his behavior should have been different because people are filming this, but it's just kind of in the course of the script. And then he says, I can't breathe. It's like you don't really step back and think to yourself, as that cop, where have I seen this before? Where might this lead? What is going to be the end result? It's wrong in and of itself that it's happening, but the fact that it doesn't occur to this cop, like, holy shit, like I've seen this play out before, and the end result is not it's not what I want. Maybe he did, who knows? But just the fact that all those things played out and the things that we've seen over and over and over again, and it wasn't a trigger in his head to kind of stand up. You've got plenty of guys around you. If you do fear that he's going to get violent, you can hold him down in some other fashion. So with this one, I have named it, for me, it's especially gratuitous. It's like you knew what you were doing. So that's why this one especially stands out. They all stood out based on their, you know, various details, situations, whatever happened. But this one, I think, is a tipping point because, like we talked about, we're seeing protests across the world.
Hmm.
Even in war-torn countries, they're painting those murals and saying, I can't breathe. And crowds of hundreds of thousands are showing up, like whether it's in Paris or in England, or you said something before about Africa appealing to, I think you said the UN.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, we always think when something like this happens, they're like, okay, this is the time that it's going to catch on. There are protests, and then it kind of dies off. This one seems a little different, and that's what you want, and I want to do. What is in case it's not going to be different, in case it kind of goes, try to go back to normal. We want to try to keep that conversation going because it has to be an ongoing thing. There is no quick fix. We know right from wrong, but I mean, there's millions of people in this world, billions of people. um, you can't just say you're in the right, you're in the wrong. You guys got to sort it out to get in the right. It has to be an ongoing conversation of understanding each other. So that's what we want to get to with this.
Yeah, and it's going off of that. It's just accountability, right? It's we have to hold each other accountable, and I think with George Floyd's case, I think that the Minneapolis Police Department lacked accountability because there were cases, plenty cases, where he killed people of color, people of different
Yeah,
backgrounds. And so this is nothing new for him. He probably thought, oh, I'm going to get away with it because he clearly got away with no discipline with the previous murders that he did with an indigenous man, a Latino man, and now a black man. And I think he had some other cases where he didn't have discipline with. And it's just like the lack of
yeah,
accountability. And I know I saw something not too long ago where it said it was exploring the topic of snitching, right, or ratting out someone else, right?
yeah,
So just how it's frowned upon in the streets, right, to rat out your friend to the cops or to snitch on someone, right? It's the same standard holds in the police department. So it's kind of like if a good cop is seeing a bad cop or just another cop doing something they probably shouldn't be doing, they don't say anything because there's the lack of accountability, and it's like they will probably be frowned upon if they speak up and say something and probably would lose their job for being a decent human being. So it's just the lack of accountability on all ends, and I think this is the number one thing that all Americans need to learn, because guess what, when a police officer isn't in uniform, they're a regular civilian just like anyone else. So it's kind of
yeah.
like we just need to get better at the accountability piece, and I mean respect. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
at the end of
yeah,
the
of
day.
course.
So
And I've seen this thing. I got it up here on my other screen. I've seen this thing where um, nothing is black and white. Of course, in this series, we want to get towards understanding that we have to fight racism. Okay, but nothing is black and white. And the graphic that I've seen is it's like you've probably seen it on social media. It's like the three circles, and they're concentric circles, and it says, "Believe it or not, it's okay to be all three." So, outraged by George Floyd's death, not condoning looting and rioting, and supporting good police officers. Because nowadays it's like you can only have one stance. So if you criticize the one cop's behavior, all of a sudden you're against cops. If you there are people that see protesting the same as looting and rioting. So if you justify, if you back the protesting, people are going to say, okay, so you're for looting and rioting. No. And there's so many gray areas. It's not so simple. The lines aren't clean. I support cops very much so, but at a certain point, I mean, there was just a video where in Canada, um, an indigenous chief was pulled over. Maybe that's the one you were talking about. I don't know if the guy from Minneapolis had done the same, but they showed a video, and it's a dashboard cam, and there's a pickup truck, and there's two cops, and then the chief gets out and he walks around the truck. I don't know what was going on the other side, but then they jump on this chief that's smaller than them, is wielding no weapon, um, and then this other cop comes out of the frame, outside the frame, like a linebacker, and tackles this guy to the ground like he's in the NFL. And then they're holding him down, and he's an older man. I'm not judging his strength or anything like that, but the chief looked like he was in his 60s. And while he's down, like the cop just punches him in the face, and it's ugly to see, but they took a picture of it. And I mean, I think he split his cheek, and he's all bruised up, and he's got a black eye. Um, so me, it's like when I see things like this, the first thing I utter is like, where the hell do they find these cops? But then I'm going to hear from friends that are cops saying, "Oh, you're against the cops." Like, no, no. Where did they find these cops? So you have to wonder about the culture and how they vet the cops, and because you can just tell that some cops approach it in that way. And I mean, as we speak today, another black man was killed yesterday in Wendy's, and I think his crime, or why they called the cops on him, was that he fell asleep in a Wendy's drive-through under the influence, intoxicated, what have you. They were trying to take him in. He grabbed the taser, ran away, pointed the gun back at the taser to shoot the officer with the taser, and the cop just shot him dead. Um, and there's just so many gray areas there. There's so many gray areas there. People are saying, should he have done the right thing and just stayed where he was and been taken in? Fine. Did the cop really have to elevate it to that level, knowing that he was facing a taser? And I can't judge cops, because I wouldn't trust myself as a cop. If somebody flinched next to me, who knows what I would do? Yeah, but something in that culture has to change. And I mean, you've seen cops across the country take a knee, join a protest, walk in a parade, what have you, and then you see the other side. So it's like I would love to know, like, what makes one cop one way and the other cop, that complete opposite. But it's a cultural thing, and it's not. And just because you're saying you're shining a light on an area doesn't mean I'm judging everybody. But there is something that needs to change. And you said your father has been profiled
oh
and
yeah.
had a tough time with cops.
Yeah, and I mean, and he's a captain in the fire department, and but what I was going to say, you know, this is a tense time for cops as well. I'm sure all of them are on edge, even the good cops, whatever. Just being a cop in general in America right now, I'm sure is terrifying. Like I've read things, and even one of my friend is a cop, and he said, he doesn't go into work with his uniform. He drives in his normal attire and changes into uniform when he gets to work. because he's just scared that, you know, what if someone attacks him, if, you know, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
okay, well, now you know what it means to be a Black person in America.
Exactly,
Because
exactly.
it's like,
That because you look like somebody else, all of a sudden you have those attributes, whether they're good,
exactly.
bad, what have you. Yeah,
And
yeah,
like, and what you were saying about Rayshard Brooks, the man who died in
yeah,
in the Wendy's, imagine if he was a white man. Like, and I really think it's fair to say this. If he was a white
yeah,
man, I can 100% sure he would still be alive today. And
yeah.
it's really crazy, and I think that a lot of people feel, I don't know what the word is, maybe attacked, or like, how can you draw that conclusion? I'm like, I don't know, like, look at all the cases that's been happening all across America,
Yeah.
and even in the UK, or just like, even all across the world, like, this is happening. I feel like the darker your skin, the more targeted you are, and it's just like, we have to stop this. And I think that in a way, I feel the more we talk about it, the more these cases happen, the more accountability will arise from it, the more progress we can make in Congress, hopefully. I mean, I don't know, just with the laws that we have and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But it's like, I don't know if you saw, they passed Breonna's law.
Yep.
And how can you pass a law named after the person that was a victim of police brutality, and those police officers that killed her are not arrested? So it's like, okay, you want to look good because you passed a law? Like, I just
Yeah.
I just don't understand. Like, how can you pass a law after someone who died, and
In her
her
bed,
huh?
right? In her bed.
Well, yeah, well, she was in her apartment, but it's just like, I just don't understand how the cops that killed her are not held accountable, arrested, and convicted. Like, I just don't understand.
And I
I just
mean,
don't
there
get
have
it.
been in several of these cases. I mean, I think even the chief of the Atlanta police um, force resigned. I think because of what happened to Rayshard. Um,
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yep, in Atlanta.
so there are suspensions, there are terminations. Granted, you have to weigh in on them with the same level of the law. Because I mean, look what happened in Georgia, um, where we saw the video of the jogger being killed. 2.5 months, 2 months after it happened, and only then, when there was a public outcry, did
That's when.
the father and son duo be brought to justice. So I don't know. Like, hopefully this keeps accountability at the forefront. But I think this is going to be a different shift. We're hoping it's a different shift, but that's kind of what we want to keep this. Why we want to keep this thing going is keep the conversation going. So
Yeah, and so going off of that, I mean, let's talk about, our expectation out of this. I think that this project in particular is going to be awesome to provide different perspectives from allies, as well as people who are directly affected by this. And I think, again, just creating a safe space from our little corners of the world. I think
yeah,
us doing our part and holding ourselves accountable and talking about this, but also providing the platform, right, and creating an environment where we can openly talk about this on a professional platform as well.
yeah,
Because, I really firmly believe nothing right now should be treated business as usual, and I see a lot of companies treating that as such. And
yeah,
I just, like, we are not only in a global pandemic, but we
yeah,
are also in a racial civil rights war right now. And it's
yeah,
just like, people I could probably safe to say, in every company right now, don't feel safe because of the color of their skin, you
yeah,
know like, it's just terrifying. And I just don't understand how we can't acknowledge big elephant in the room. Like, okay, this happened this week, and then a lot of companies are kind of putting out their solidarity statement saying, oh, we don't tolerate this. Okay, well, what are you doing after that? What are you doing after you share your solidarity
cookie cutter
statement?
statements.
Right. It's like,
Yeah,
you're kind of doing it because, in a way, you have to, because it would be frowned upon if you didn't, and I'm grateful that my company did, and I'm seeing a lot of other companies and organizations that I support share their solidarity statements, which is a beautiful thing. But again, accountability. What are you doing after this, after you share that word, the statement of words, like where's the action that's going to follow that? And I think
Yeah.
that if we provide this type of conversation on a professional platform where a lot of companies, organizations, and leaders at organizations, are on LinkedIn, this might be something that can kind of strike a nerve and get some momentum going, and hopefully just make some good action for just people, because it's not just our Black brothers and sisters that are affected by this, allies too. It's kind of like everyone is, I can't say everyone, but there's a lot of people that are trying to do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
like, what happens when you're trying to do the right thing and then there's a lack of accountability, or lack of awareness, or lack of acknowledgement from leaders at the top who don't do something about it? And I
Yeah.
think these types of conversations is what's important, and I really can't wait to have different perspectives and different panelists on here to really even, this is a learning experience for everyone, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah. This is a learning experience. If you and I are trying to set that example to be honest and kind of speak what we feel,
yeah.
knowing that we're trying to learn at the same time, because what I've learned in the last couple of weeks, based on everything that's happened, and not that social media is the ideal of what you want, but a lot of people on every side have different perspectives of how they want to talk about this. So even the people that are marching out in the streets across the country, wherever they are,
Yeah.
they all have, even if they want to head in the right direction, aside from protesting at the same time, in their mind they may have different needs for how they want to talk about it. So I've learned that, you know, different Black people are going to talk about it differently, different white people are going to talk about it differently, different people of color are going to talk about, they're going to use different words, they're going to use different emotion, they're going, it's it's a Russian roulette when it comes to a conversation, because you can find two people that are ready to have an honest conversation, and then you can find one person who's ready and the other who's not,
Mm.
whatever color may fall on either side. So this is not going to be pretty. It's not, that's one thing I want to say, is that this is going to be, we're going to try to be as honest as possible. We're not going to always get it right. I mean, you never know what's going to come up, but the important part is just to kind of keep going. So you had mentioned the need for professionalism in this.
Yeah.
Do you want to give a little bit about your background, just so we all get an idea, and I'll do the same for myself after you, just so we get an idea, or whoever's watching this gets an idea of where we're coming from, because I think showing what people are doing in their work kind of gives a view as to where they're coming from when they're sharing on a topic or a discussion. So anything you want to share on your background would be great.
Yeah, thank you. So to be honest, when stuff like this in the media happens, it's an unfortunate thing, but this is also where I like to contribute the most. I do consider myself a diehard activist, because I will literally put my life on the line in a protest or to protect someone else, and that's just who I am at the core of my being. Um, I do consider myself a community organizer. I have been doing this for probably since I was a kid, but
Okay. Okay.
my first protest, I think, was, I don't know, might have been like 16 or 17, I'm not sure. So I've been doing this for a long time. I'm very passionate about it. And just the fact that people are still fighting for basic human rights,
Yeah.
this fight doesn't stop, and I understand where others' journeys are just beginning, and I acknowledge that and I appreciate that. But it's also like, this hasn't ever gone away. So I'm happy that more people are learning and joining the fight, because we need as many people as possible to achieve basic human rights.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my full time, I work at Stanley Black & Decker. I'm really proud to work there. I love working there so much. I work in human resources. I do wear different hats in the company, which is awesome. I'm in it's called Stanley Leadership Program. So it's like an early career rotational program, where I get exposure to many different things and projects and leaders in the company. So I support our talent development team. So I work on performance reviews and the system behind that. I also work in the communications area, especially in diversity and inclusion as well. Very passionate about that. And ERGs, or employee resource groups, I think
Yep.
is a great place to be right now, especially with everything going on in the world, because it kind of provides another safe space for people to openly be who they are, as well as acknowledge what's going on. And so I'm very active in our ERG space.
Yeah.
Aside from Stanley, I am part of a independent film company where we, it's again, like, we're acknowledging what's going on in the world, and we create a narrative or create a story, a visual representation of what's going on. And sometimes I am a firm believer that video or film or just art, music, and or in general the arts have a way of expressing and representing what's going on that words simply can't. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to be part of that space as well. um and aside from that, I'm just, like I said, like I opened this up, I'm a diehard activist, and I like to leverage the arts as a platform. So I do spoken word and I do film, and I just think, and I'm very open with myself, so I open up about my personal struggles, and I think we could see that with the article that I wrote on LinkedIn, because I feel like the more open and the more vulnerable we are as humans,
Yeah.
the more that basically gives permission for someone else to share their
Yeah.
stories.
It's
And I'm a
huge.
firm believer that if I continue to share my story, stand on my grounds, and stay in my truth, that this will give someone the opportunity to share theirs and to also save a life. Like, there's so many people that feel isolated on what's going on right now, and I don't want people to feel alone in this, because this is really everyone's fight. We're all going through this together, and I think the more accountability that we provide for one another in a safe and healthy way, I think the more we can get people to acknowledge, like, hey, you're probably affected by this. Let's see what we can do together to express how you feel, and to get someone else to express how they feel. Again, it's kind of that ripple effect, that domino
Yeah.
effect, that if we stand in our truth, we can allow someone else to share theirs. So what about
That's,
you? Who's John?
but before I forget, because I'm an old man and I always forget things, you speaking about vulnerability is huge, just because um, before these killings in the last couple of weeks, when the main story was still the pandemic, there was just a lot of vulnerability. I mean, there was a lot of online communication, a lot of online meetings and webinars where I think people were like, there's so much going on in the world right now. You don't know where the pandemic is going. So people were opening up more and more.
Mm,
And I bring that up only because you brought up vulnerability, and I completely recognize and appreciate that what you just said about vulnerability, opening up, setting the stage for somebody else to come forward with what is bothering them or what they think makes them weak. Um, and I'll get into it in a second, but I'm a leadership coach, and I see that a lot, like across different cases and clients. And just talking to people, it's like they may have an issue, we may have an issue, whatever issue we're facing, and the bulk of what holds us back is thinking that we're the only ones that are going through it. So that when we open up, it's just kind of a relief. It's off our shoulders. But in any case, for my part, I've been a budget analyst with the state of Connecticut for over 16, 17 years. I started a leadership coaching company a couple of years ago. I specialize in helping people come into new positions of leadership, new titles that they're taking on. So kind of people and companies bring me in saying, this is a person we want to bring up to the next level or have brought up to the next level. This is why we did it. Can you just help them kind of refine? It's amazing what people don't know that they're
mm,
capable of.
amen.
Also did mediation in the past. So for a lot of these conversations, as a Latino man, um, you're not in the middle because it isn't impacting me directly, but I see the conversations go back and forth.
Mm,
So when I see those conversations go back and forth, my mediator hat automatically comes up.
yeah.
So depending on who's talking to each other, and again, there's an infinite number of conversations that can take place depending on who's saying and who's listening and vice versa. So I'll listen to these conversations on race, especially after a black man has been killed, and at this point, black women with these high-profile cases that have come out. And you listen to the communication that they have with each other, and I can tell when they lose each other or when they say something that turns the other side off. Nobody should be turned off by this conversation, but we have to admit that we're still humans. So we still communicate in a certain way. So that That's huge for me in terms of just listening to the conversation that's taking place and just seeing the misfires of communication. So I hope that the work that we do here, having these panels, we'll get into what we want to do in terms of each episode. But what I'm
Mhm.
hoping is that we can kind of get people to reconcile their stories, understand where the other one's coming from. Um, I think I've seen a lot of stuff where, and I mean, we're getting into like the protest stuff, but I've seen a lot of stuff where there are signs that say silence is violence,
Mm,
silence is complicity, silence is betrayal.
yeah.
And I get what they're coming from, but different people are quiet for different reasons. You know, they may have tried their best, but for whatever reason, were shut down.
Mm,
I've seen, you know, a couple weeks ago when they had the kind of blackout tile on social media, kind of to
mm,
support Black Lives Matter, and just everything that was going on,
mhm.
and people saying that's not enough. But the thing is, you have to understand, and again, this is that whole mediation thing.
Right.
What is, and mediation is essentially people are arguing because they're talking about their wants, like what I want, what you want. You're getting emotional. Where you should be talking about your needs, like what do I really need instead of taking too much for myself.
Mm,
But I digress with that point. But with that tile, it was like you can't get emotional and mad at somebody for doing that, because for some people, there are people on their connections list, whatever social media you may be talking about, or family, that's straight up racist. And it may not seem like a lot to us, but to them putting up that black tile puts their family on notice that they're not putting up with anything. That's,
mm,
for some people, that may be huge because they've dealt with families that are completely racist. So it's, for me, it's that communication piece. I've always said, like, the right conversation isn't being had, and we can work towards that conversation. This is trial and error. This doesn't have to be perfect. And that's what I'm hoping that we'll get to. So,
yeah.
Mimi, if you wanted to, you just want to break down the idea of what we want to kind of achieve in each episode, what the panels will look like, and what we're trying to see, what we can accomplish through this.
Yeah, and honestly, before I get into that, just because I think it's gonna tie in like great, I saw something on, and it's something that I learned in the Obama Foundation community program that I was in.
Yeah,
It talks about how when, just in the social justice system, right, there are different roles for different people, right? And so, kind of acknowledging what you said, where people are in different parts of their journeys with everything going on, everyone is not supposed to have the same role, right? We need people to be community organizers. We need people to inspire and have these types of conversations. Like, we need people who are going to leverage the arts to, like, there's people in different roles part of this. If everyone's doing the same thing, then we're not going to be able to reach all the other people that's in the world. We
yeah,
need
that's a good
people
point.
to operate from their different corners of the world and do what they're passionate about, because if you're passionate about something, 9 times out of 10 there's going to be someone else that is, and we can lift each other up. So this is not a
Yes,
time for us to be all doing the same thing. However, if we know that we are committed to the same message and the same vision, and acknowledge our perspectives, our views, as well as our blind spots, we can
yeah,
come together to acknowledge, okay, what's the overall vision that we want to achieve? And that's the whole point, I think, of this Black Lives Matter movement. And it even goes
yeah,
beyond that. It's like, okay, like, we all have a role to play, and it might not all be the same, and that's okay.
yeah,
So with that, I think what we're expecting out of this video series, I mean, I don't really have expectations, to be honest. I think that I really want to understand what other folks and their roles are in this systemic change and this social justice movement, or I just want to understand, like, what they feel about this and what they're doing to maybe hold themselves accountable or hold someone else accountable. I really just want to understand where we stand as people, right? And I think,
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's almost like a listening tour kind of thing.
yeah, exactly, because I think that's honestly perfect that you said that, because that's what it is. So for so long, a lot of people did not feel comfortable speaking up about this.
Yeah,
And I'm not happy, obviously, of what happened to George Floyd and all these. all these cases, no one should be dying
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the color of their skin. No one should. But at the same time, I think that, I saw a video of his daughter standing on top of her uncle's shoulders, and it said,
Yep. I
wow,
saw that.
daddy changed the world.
Yeah.
And it sucks that it takes for someone to die in order to have all this change. But think about it, just even in our own individual families, when a friend or a family member dies, it's like when someone dies, that's when you want to acknowledge like how great of a person they were,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
how what this person contributed to society. And like we shouldn't have to wait for one another to die in order to change the world. We
Yeah.
should be changing the world right now as we're living and we're breathing, to make the world better for someone else. And so I
Definitely.
think by just understanding, and what you said, like with the listening tour, I think that's exactly what this is. We just want to understand where one another's coming from, so that
Yeah.
way this is our way of changing the world. Like someone from that network, from that other person's network,
Yeah.
this was like, you know we can all take something away from this. And one thing I learned at a very young age, that I learned, is that everyone knows something that I don't know, right? Every person in this world, maybe even a white supremacist, they have something that I don't know, that I don't see.
Yeah.
I cannot, like, they've had a different set of experiences in their life that I am so far removed from.
Yeah.
But I feel like, yes, opposition is always going to exist in this world. Always. It's never going to go away. And I
Oh
think
yeah. That.
that's what
Yeah.
America is built on, right? That we can have differing opinions and still coexist. That's
Yeah.
what America acknowledges, and it's a free country. But with that, it's kind of like, and it's something I learned from someone I look up to very much. Her name is Robin McCallan. She's the executive director for True Colors. She
Okay.
says, you don't have to keep up, but you have to keep open. And
Yes.
with that, she was acknowledging how, there's several identities and pronouns and everything, that we are learning in the LGBTQIA plus community. But I think that standard also applies to everything else in this
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
right? We
Yeah.
don't, you don't have to, I mean, it would be nice if you were to keep up, but this is like, I just want you to understand. And I
Yeah.
think that if we can have that set of expectation, or that standard to set the tone, not only for this panel but just for life in general, like, listen, we don't have to see eye to eye, but I think we don't need to argue, because what's the point of arguing? Like, we just see the world through a different lens, and that's okay. Like, let's just not be mean, let's not kill each other, let's just understand where each other's coming from.
Uh, there's
So
just so much you just said. I need to start keeping notes so I can kind of um yeah, the thing that stands out, what you said, is you don't need to keep up, just keep open. Because I think, like I said, there's so many conversations going on, there's so many points of view, that even within these various groups, if you're trying to help and you use the wrong word, not a slur or anything like that, even with this series that we're trying to do, I had mentioned allies, and somebody told me
yeah,
to instead use accomplice.
accomplices. Yep.
We decided on both, but at the same time, it's kind of like, and a lot of people say, yeah, you can have the best of intentions, but that's not enough. But then if you tell people that, some people may shut down. Some people
Yeah.
will not, maybe some people won't say, okay, I have the best of intentions. You're right. Maybe I should kind of go a different route. Some people will just say, I tried to step out of my comfort zone and I kind of got shut down. And in the last few weeks, when I've attended different seminars and webinars and forums, and obviously race came up with these murders coming out,
Mm.
I heard from a lot of white people that I think I was watching one on protests, and that whole silences kept
Yeah.
coming up. And when the speaker was done, I spoke up and I said, listen, that that kind of scares me, because you're isolating people. That it's so tricky, Mimi, to talk about any of this stuff, because you'll say they don't have the right tools to go forward and kind of share what we're trying to get out there. And then people on the other side will say, like, well, they should have had the tools. Everybody's been going through this for so long. My point is, it's almost like everyone you deal with has to have the best of intentions and they have to try. But at some point, you kind of have to meet them where they are. And it's tricky. because I understand, I try to understand what the Black community is going through. I can never put myself in those shoes completely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emotion there, but we can't shut people down because they're unsure about how to proceed effectively. And a lot of people are trying to say, what is it I need to do specifically? And they're being misread as, why is this important? And people are getting upset saying, how do you not know why this is important? So it's all about just that communication. We need to keep going with that. And I've just seen that way too much where that communication is breaking down how we can move forward. And what I was going to say was about the groups. If you're not using the right phrasing, you get shut down. So I'm glad you brought up. You don't have to keep up, just keep open. And as well, just that reference that you gave about that you could learn something from a KKK member. Now, taken out of context, that'd be like, holy shit, this is support for the KKK. It's like,
Yeah,
no, there are gray
absolutely.
areas. Just because I'm open to listening doesn't mean that I'm not keeping somebody accountable. That I'm not saying that they should proceed with caution or not fighting them. You need to know what you're fighting before you can fight it. And I
Right.
mean, there's a great example. I always bring this example up of a guy named Daryl Davis, who's a jazz musician, a Black man, and he was, I think he was touring somewhere, and a white man from the audience said, "Hey, I like your playing. You know, yeah, enjoyed it very much." And Daryl was like, "All right, let's grab a drink," or something to that effect.
Mm.
And they got to talking, and then by the end of the conversation, the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm in the KKK." So Daryl's like, "What?" So as from, if I remember like the interview that I heard with him correctly, as he was coming through that area again, he would call this guy up and they'd meet up for drinks. And at a certain point,
Wow.
they had a conversation, and the guy gave his KKK outfits and robes and just said, "I'm done with that life."
Mm.
And this goes back to something you said, where maybe we don't understand how they grew up, where they grew up, why they see things the way they see them.
Hmm.
But he went on to collect robes from, I think, over 200 KKK members.
Wow.
So it doesn't sound pretty, but it's like you do have to hear these ugly opinions to kind of get to that communication and see what you can build up. Because if you just shut it off, it kind of just perpetuates what they're thinking on their side. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's why, like with the whole what you were saying, like the silence is compliance. I mean, I see that, I
yeah,
do, and
yeah,
I
of course,
in a way, I also do believe that in a way, just because I think yes, well, even we have certain experiences in our homes and our youth and stuff. When you become an adult, you have a choice to make, right?
of
So I
course,
feel like you could have always made a choice to learn and educate, but I'm acknowledging that this is like all of, like, in our face. You can't ignore it, so you have to kind of have to learn more about it. But you know what, I think that by now, if someone hasn't said something, it's
yeah,
concerning to me, because it's like
yeah,
it's been going on already for many years, but just within the last couple months and stuff like that, since Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor, like, I feel like if you're not saying anything, okay, but I need to know
of course,
that you're educating yourself or that you're willing to have these conversations, because silence is unacceptable, in my
yeah,
opinion. It's not allowed. However, if someone is being silent, I don't mind taking on that responsibility to hold someone else accountable, obviously in a
oh yeah,
professional and nice
of
way and stuff
course,
like that. um but at the end of the day, I think that trying to see from someone else's perspective, I don't expect that from my Black brothers and sisters, because they're grieving, they're
of
mourning,
course,
and I feel like that's the whole importance of allyship and accompliceship, with being a Latinx woman, or our Asian brothers and sisters, our indigenous brothers and sisters, our especially our white brothers and sisters. I think that we need to hold each other more accountable and learn together, because this has been our Black brothers and sisters journey
yeah,
for 800 plus years. So, and I specifically didn't say 400 years, because this goes way back before
yeah,
American history teaches us. But I think that it's our time to step up and to learn and to hold each other accountable, because I'm not expecting my Black brothers and sisters to educate me when there are lots of resources out there where we can. Google is powerful. You want to read a book? Cool. Okay, great. Like, you know, obviously not everyone is comfortable with protest. And I understand we're still in a global pandemic, so I haven't seen like a lot of people protesting. I think that's okay. Like, there's
Yeah.
also virtual protesting, right? So like, what are you doing to post, which I don't think is enough, but you know, if you're posting as well as educating or having these types of conversations, like, you're in it, you're in the fight, you know. And I just think that letting everyone know that you're in the fight is important, because yeah, you're going to be seen as silent and you're going to be seen as compliant. And I just feel like it's a way for us to hold each other accountable. And it's like,
Yeah.
and that's really all this is. And I think that, you know, you mentioned the allyship and accomplishment, and you know, both are important, because allyship is kind of like where you are in the beginning of your journey, or maybe you like protesting, and we need allies, right? We need allies to kind of break those barriers, between our Black brothers and sisters, and maybe people in the LGBT community. Like, we need allies to help amplify our message, right?
Mhm.
But accomplices, you know, take that step further. It's like, okay, we're walking the talk, we're walking the walk. It's like we're doing these things, but we're also, you know, approaching our politicians, our political officials, our holding our police accountable. You know, we're doing the action items to actually
Yeah.
get the systemic change happen. So
Yeah.
we need both. And I think that having this video series will, you know, make us aware of who's an ally, who's an accomplice, and maybe they're interchangeable, you know, or maybe this is just something that a lot of people don't know about. And this is
Yeah.
just yet another opportunity for people to learn what their role is in this journey. And I think that's what it is. Everyone probably doesn't know. There's people, like we mentioned earlier, are new to this. There's people who have been in this fight for a long time, and roles change, you know, roles change over time. And, you know, someone who might started out as someone just learning about it, to being an ally, to now being an accomplice, you know, like, we all have different roles to play. They may change over time, but I think nonetheless, everyone's role is to hold each other accountable and to build more allies and to build more accomplices, because without that, we're going to stay the same. And this is why we see history repeating itself over
Oh
and
yeah.
over
Yeah.
and over again,
Yeah.
because we don't have enough allies. Like, we need more allies. And I don't think that that's the end all solution. However, I think that's my role to play in all of this. Is I'm very passionate about building allies. And so I will probably talk throughout this video series about a campaign that I've started on Instagram. It's called hashtag as an ally I will.
Okay.
And if you want, I can also send you that video. But basically, my call to action is to our white brothers and sisters, as well as, you know, people in the Latinx, Asian, you know, everyone who's not Black, to, at the top of your paper or your notepad on your digital device, write hashtag as an ally I will. And under that, you're listing how many things you're actually doing as an ally. You
Yeah.
post it to your social media and you nominate however many people to do it. And so right now I've seen over, I think 150 people have done it on Instagram. And I check the hashtag every day just to see how many people, and I hold people accountable. I'm just like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
great, keep it up, you know. But it's like, I see people who've actually donated to organizations. I've seen people protest. I've seen people talk to their dad that's a cop, you know. Like, this is the type of accountability I'm talking about, you
Yeah.
know, and it be okay to do. So
Yeah. It's like you said, everybody has like their own thing that they can do. They can play different roles as long as
yeah,
they're moving in that direction and actually doing
exactly.
something.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I'll admit for myself in the past, it's almost been like my mantra in life was just, don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
And I mean, being neutral or not being negative doesn't mean that you're working towards the positive. So there's that whole conversation of, no, I'm not racist, but then that's
Hmm.
you want to step it up and be like, okay, but you got to work towards anti-racism. Not
Exactly. Not
just
just
being a
you.
good person,
Yeah.
not just being a good person to everybody in my life from all walks of life,
Mm.
because I just want to have a good time in life. In the past, I mean, that just isn't enough. So yeah, like so I have my things that I want to do. I want to move forward in this conversation, and this is a huge piece of that, is just kind of having that kind of listening tour from people from different backgrounds and getting that proper communication, just because I don't want to see it drop off anymore.
Oh, amen.
I don't want
Amen.
something to happen, and everybody's got that fever about going out and protesting, and it stays in the news, and then it just drops off. I mean, even since George Floyd, there've been like three other killings of black men.
Oh, way
So
more. That'll probably
yeah, that we
even.
know of. Yeah,
Yep,
exactly. That
exactly.
are high profile that we know of. Who knows how many more are out there? But I mean, it's time that this conversation, continues in this manner. So that's why we want to do this with this panel structure. So each episode we'd have like 3 to 4 people from different backgrounds, and just to kind of get the conversation going of what their view is of race relations today, how they view it, how they want to move forward in it. And it's going to take a lot of honesty. And we'll see what we get. It's not going to be a perfect combination. I mean, we have kind of ground rules that we want to set for this, and we haven't finalized the ground rules. And it's just kind of like a way to guide the conversation. And the first one is that this show isn't perfect.
Yeah.
There's no complete answer that's going to solve everything. There are just too many voices, too many opinions, too many thoughts to all move in unison, in the same way, at the same pace. It's important to keep that conversation. So that's what we want to do with this. And like you said, try to find out how people are being allies and how they're being accomplices, where it is they feel comfortable moving forward with what they can do. So
Right.
that's what we hope to get out of this.
Yeah, and acknowledging that this show is an evolution just like life. What might have held true 20 years ago is probably what doesn't hold true to today. And just keeping that concept in mind is just like, this is all a journey for us all. And
Yeah,
I think that if we do acknowledge that we do need to meet each other where we are at, then I think that will create this safe space for people, even setting excuse me, even setting the tone for when people do have these types of conversations with maybe racist people in their families, or
yeah.
maybe a friend that might not be racist but have said microaggressions, or
Oh
have
yeah. Oh yeah.
said things that they don't know are racist, which is very true. A lot of people don't know some of the things that they say are a microaggression. And I think these conversations that we're having will maybe, I don't want to say teach, but maybe help facilitate that type of conversation, to be like, hey, I'm not here to, I mean, maybe we can change or influence each other's perspective, but I'm not here to change who you are as a person. I'm just really here to listen to you,
Yeah.
your views. I expect the same from you, to listen to my perspective and my views and my experiences. But maybe how can we work together to, you know, help in this fight? Because at the end of the day, racism is wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but if I'm talking to an anti-race, I mean not an anti-racist, to a racist, I'm open to listening to them, as much as hard and painful that may be. I'm open to having that type of conversation, because if that's going to provide me the tools to help my Black brothers and sisters, I'm willing to put myself in that position and predicament to
Yeah.
educate myself in this fight, and I've experienced racism myself. Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm just willing to take on that role and that responsibility, to put myself in an uncomfortable situation to learn more, and I think that if other folks kind of have that same approach, we could do a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just go back to that, like the way that you approach it, that you would be open to having a conversation
Yeah,
with somebody who is on the opposite side of the spectrum
exactly.
of race relations. A lot of people wouldn't be able to even hear somebody entertaining the thought of having the
Yeah,
so there are so many people out there, and they're anticipating different ways to approach it. So that's huge that you're willing to do that. We have to accept that there are some people out there that don't see the benefit of it, and they may even have an issue with it. But That's the difficult conversations that we're talking about, getting that ripple effect going so that the communication opens. It's not that we're
Yeah.
going to have people like that outright on this show, on this video series, but I mean, the listening has to go in every direction, and you kind of have to meet people where they are, and everybody has that responsibility to move forward. But
Yeah.
that's like the perfect example that you're saying, tough conversations. Would you as an activist, since you were 16, since you were a young girl, would you, if that opportunity came up, meet with somebody that was in that opposite position? And I believe you would.
And I
um
have before, and
yeah.
it
So
definitely didn't change their perspective, but I think they appreciated being listened to. I mean, gonna be honest, I don't care if they felt appreciated to be listened to if they're racist, but
yeah, of course,
just being able to have that type of conversation. And I think polit I don't want to say politics aside, because this is politics. I think life is politics. So for people to say that they don't talk about political or controversial things, I'm like, well, are you alive right now? Because I think everything is
yeah,
politics right now,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you can't avoid it. But I think, I guess, political party aside, I think that just our president, just some of the things that he says, even before George Floyd, since 2016 when he came into office, I think that a lot of the
yeah,
things he have said have allowed for people to have these types of uncomfortable conversations as well, because it's like he said things against women, against the trans community, against people who were disabled, and I think that him as a leader is kind of opening up more
I mean,
people to feel.
it's pulling back that curtain
Yeah,
on what's already out there.
exactly.
um
So I think that what makes this time in history a little bit different than the 60s and even the 90s, that we do have more allies, and I think that if we focus on building more allies and working together and listening to understand, not listening to talk,
yeah,
I think is the biggest thing that we can do. So I'm really excited about this. And in regards to ground rules, maybe there's other ground rules that some of our panelists that can
oh
share,
yeah,
that they've had in their discussions, and we can learn as well,
yeah.
So I'm really excited for this. And yeah, do you want to say any closing remarks before we end tonight or
No,
today?
I agree with you on the ground rules in terms of this show, isn't perfect. It's not always going to be perfect, but I'm big on curiosity and learning. So I think that's huge that we both have that mindset. And I love the fact that you mentioned that we may get recommendations from people that we talk to based on ground rules. It's
Right.
not that we are proactively trying to collect a large list of ground rules, but
Yeah,
I think it's important for us. They're going to shape this conversation going forward.
exactly.
Hopefully, no two episodes look the same. I don't think they will, just because if you took um, various groups of color and a white person and you picked four to have one conversation, then you picked another four to have a different conversation on the same topic, the conversations would just go in different directions. If you mixed and matched those two groups where you randomized, now you're on that group, the conversation would go in a different direction.
Mm.
So what's great is that I think there's an infinite number of ways that these conversations can go, and I think they're really going to shape each episode after that. So let's just get started and we'll jump into it. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad you're going to take this journey with me, and I'm going to take it with you, and we'll
Same.
see what we can mix up and learn from each other and the people that we talk to.